Hi, everyone. Welcome to Exploring Health, Macro to Micro. I'm your host, Parker Condit. So on this show, I interview health and wellness experts, and by the end of each episode, you'll have concrete, tangible advice that you can start implementing today on how to live a healthier life, either for yourself or for your loved ones. And that's the micro side of the show. The macro side of the show is discussing and having conversations around larger systemic issues that contribute to health outcomes here in the US. But today's show takes a slightly different approach to the same goal. So instead of speaking with a healthcare executive or a medical doctor, endurance coach, or nurse practitioner, or anyone else like that, I'm actually speaking with a patient today who has a pretty remarkable story. So my guest today is Terry Tucker. In 2012, Terry was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. Through a series of surgeries, he had the cancerous tumors removed and he was put on weekly injections of interferon. However, the interferon led to drastic weight loss, flu-like symptoms, constant nausea, fatigue, chills, and body aches. And this went on continuously for almost 5 straight years. So I hesitate to even share any more because I know my reading of an intro doesn't do his story justice. If there's one common theme that shows up throughout this episode, I would say the idea of courage comes up repeatedly. Terry also speaks about his youth and how playing sports and his upbringing instilled a certain level of discipline, which has served him throughout his life. So some parts of this conversation get a little bit philosophical, but I think sharing stories like this are important because they highlight the humanity that's needed for any real change to occur in our healthcare system. So if I'm going to try to get people to have a deeper appreciation for their own health and driving change in our healthcare system, I don't see a way forward without speaking with more patients. So I'll probably have more patient-focused episodes moving forward. But for today, I hope you just enjoy this conversation with my guest, Terry Tucker. Terry, I appreciate you being here. Let's just start off with the 4 truths that you've sort of developed, and I think that's going to dovetail nicely into sort of your background, which is very interesting. I think our guests are going to be very interested in that.
Sure. So, well, first of all, Parker, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you. The 4 truths are kind of what I've developed certainly over my last 11 years dealing with cancer. And they're just one sentence. I have them on a Post-it note here in my office. So I see them multiple times during the day. They constantly get reinforced in my brain. First one is, control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you stronger and more resilient. The third one I look at kind of as a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one I think is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I kind of look at the 4 truths as sort of the bedrock of my soul. I just think they're kind of a good place to try to build a quality life off of.
Yeah, it's funny you'd say that. So there seem to be so many parallels between that and a lot of religions and sort of spirituality. So it's sort of like these fundamental truths that just keep showing up over and over again throughout life. And so I love that you've really harnessed that for yourself. But you sort of alluded to your background in that you're a cancer survivor. Can you sort of go back into a bit of your background? I think starting maybe with your professional background, which has been quite eclectic up until this point. I think that'd be great just to give people context on where you're coming from.
Sure. So went to college on a basketball scholarship. You can't tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall. And I went to the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and played basketball. When I graduated, I moved home to find a job. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I'm all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. And look back now and realize how little I knew about business just because I had a degree. Fortunately, I was able to find that first job in the corporate headquarters in the marketing department of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, and then I shifted to hospital administration. And then I made the major pivot in my life. I became a police officer. And part of what I did in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After law enforcement, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, became an author in 2020, started a motivational speaking business in 2019, kind of like we were talking before we jumped on, right in the middle of the pandemic. But for the last 11 years, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma that when I was initially diagnosed was, as they told me, pretty much a death sentence. Didn't have anything that they could offer me except for surgery at the time.
Yeah, there's a lot I want to dig into there, but one very non-related offshoot. The fact that you worked in marketing at Wendy's, have you seen what they're doing now? Wendy's is one of the funniest accounts on Twitter. They're usually just trolling other fast food restaurants.
I have not. I'm going to have to check it out.
It's remarkable what they're doing. So yeah, it's worth looking that up. It's very funny. And the fact that such a big corporation is doing that, they have a great Twitter account. So I'd like to say you planted the seed however many years ago.
Long time ago.
So going back to your parents, do you think kind of dealing with your parents kind of succumbing to cancer, did that help you in when you sort of encountered your journey and that you'd already tertiarily experienced it through your family?
Yeah, I think so. My dad was diagnosed with end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s, and they really didn't know how to treat a man with breast cancer back then. And they pretty much told him to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years, and he was in real estate and actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I just remembered that, you have to have a purpose. When something big like that hits you, yeah, you can sit around and say, oh, gee, woe is me. And look, I've got this terrible disease and things like that. Or you can engage your body and your mind in things that you enjoy, that you are important to you. And so I sort of tucked that in the back of my brain and said, well, when it's my time in the barrel, that I need to have a purpose in life. I need to have something that I can cling to other than, yeah, you're sick and you're probably going to die. So yeah, I think certainly, my parents taught my brothers and all. I have no sisters. I have 2 brothers. We were all athletes, and I think my parents taught us the value of family, of loving each other, of caring for each other, of supporting each other. And so, when my dad got sick, and then my grandmother actually got sick first, and then my dad. And they were literally side by side. One was in one bedroom, one was in the other. Both died of different forms of cancer. It was like, yeah, you put your life on hold because your parents put their life into you, into supporting you. So, now if it would have taken 30 years to help my grandmother and my father finally pass, then it would have been 30 years well spent, because it's family next to faith. I think family is the most important thing that we all have.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to the faith and family and the connection piece in a bit. But are your brothers also quite resilient? Because you clearly have some level of resilience that is like above the normal threshold, I believe. So do your brothers also have that? Because it seems almost like your parents have instilled something in you where fundamentally it's just part of who you are.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've got my youngest brother was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame in baseball before he tore his rotator cuff. My middle brother was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. So we were all, high level athletes, college, or in my brother's case, professional athletes. So, there's a certain mentality. I mean, it's one thing to play in grade school. It's another thing to play in high school, but to get to that next level, to play in college, was just, you had to be mentally resilient, because it certainly wasn't like it is today, where everybody's going after the money and things like that. But, I went to a military college. The Citadel was military. So I'm balancing academics, I'm balancing Division I college basketball, and I'm balancing the military. So yeah, you have to figure it out pretty quickly, or you were definitely going to fail.
I could imagine. Yeah. So I ended up playing Division III, and the jump between, I had a few friends in high school, guys I played with in high school, they ended up playing Division I. The jump between the two is enormous, and it's totally underappreciated. It's kind of remarkable that all 3 of you played at such a high level.
We were very lucky. I mean, my dad, was constantly, and, my brothers and I talk about it. If we knew today, if we knew the things that we know today about training and rest and weightlifting and nutrition, back, when we were growing up in the 70s and the 80s, we'd have been so much better athletes than we weren't, because we didn't. We didn't have a strength and conditioning coach. It was like, okay, we're gonna lift Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Okay, go in the weight room and lift. There was no program. There was no, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. It was just go in and lift. And the things we know today, boy, if we would have had those back in the 80s, man, I'd have been an All-American.
No, it's such a good point. Like when I became a personal trainer, I started thinking back, like that's not why I did it, but I started, a few years in, I started thinking, oh, this would have really helped when I was an athlete. And I think back to when I was in like 8th grade, I think that's when I started strength training. I was doing like heavy sets of squats, like 5x5, like the night before games. Couldn't figure it out why I was dragging the next day. Like we just didn't know. We were just flying blind back then. But it's definitely funny to see like what the availability of information is now to kind of what people just sort of figured out back then.
Oh, absolutely. My wife and I have one child, a daughter, and fortunately or unfortunately, she got my height, and she's 6'2", and actually played at the United States Air Force Academy. And, just not just for the athletes, but for everybody at the service academies, physical fitness is an incredibly important part of what they do. And so just the things that she was able to take advantage of to just get her in shape, not just for basketball, but, for life in general was amazing. I was kind of envious. It's like, can I come down and do that with you too? Yes.
Have you found a lot of, like, you've pulled a lot of good lessons or principles out of just having sort of the structure of like an athletic upbringing? Have you found that beneficial throughout your life?
Oh, absolutely. I think, I don't know, several years ago, there was an NCAA, National Collegiate Athletic Association commercial about how people who play sports in college at any level are just usually better employees, because they understand that, I've got to balance academics. I've got to balance my basketball. For me, it was the military. And same for our daughter. I mean, there was required study tables where we're on the road, we're playing UNLV, and it's like, okay, no, we got 2 hours from here to here. We're going to study. We're all going to get together. We're going to study and things like that. So the academic part of it, I played at a low-level Division I school, the Citadel. Southern Conference. It's not the Big Ten or the SEC or the ACC or anything like that, but it was still, we're traveling and we're getting home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and yeah, you're going to be in class at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning and stuff. Like there's no, you're sleeping in or anything like that. So yeah, you figure out what's important in life. You figure out how you're going to organize yourself, and then hopefully you apply that and get the job done.
Yeah. Terry, I'm not going to let you diminish it. Division I is Division I.
Thank you.
And it's Division I is an incredibly high level. Can you explain sort of the transition from hospital administration to becoming a police officer, and sort of what sort of life circumstances drove you to make that change?
Yeah, there is a backstory. And so my grandfather, my dad's father, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed in the United States, during the Great Depression, late 1920s, early 1930s. And when the gangs, Al Capone and those guys were shooting up the town. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle, taking a homicide suspect back to the lockup when he was a detective. And so when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad had all this recall. My dad was an infant at the time that his father was shot, but he remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door. Mrs. Tucker, have your son come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids that live happily ever after. That's what my father wanted me to do. And as I mentioned, when I graduated from college, I had a choice. He was dying of cancer. I could have said, sorry, Dad, you know what? No, you're dying, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail. I'm going to do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So the first 2 jobs were in business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did, waited till my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. And I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty late to be getting into that line of work.
There's not an age cutoff.
No, I mean, there was a 52-year-old individual who had been an accountant for a number of years, was looking for a second career that was in my police academy class. So no, there was not a cutoff.
Very interesting. So was that sort of always in the back of your mind, that sort of public servant, police track?
Yeah, it was something I wanted to do. You know, we a lot of times we talk about purpose in life. You know, we've got to have a purpose. And I think that's kind of a misnomer. I think it's not purpose singular. It's purposes plural. At least it has been for me. You know, when I was young, it was my purpose I felt was sports, athletics, playing basketball. And then eventually found my purpose as, you know, quote unquote, an adult and in being in law enforcement, even though I had other jobs. And now, you know, dealing with cancer for 11 years, of, in all honesty, probably coming to the end of my life, my purpose has changed again to be more about putting goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world with whatever time I have left. So I guess I would encourage people, you know, don't feel that, and I guess let me say one more thing about that. We like to think that our purpose is our job or our occupation or what we do for a living, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I mean, your job could be over here. It's what you do to pay the bills, but your purpose is over here. It's, you know, to be an entrepreneur, to, you know, write, to paint, to whatever it is you feel you do. And I always tell, especially young people when I speak to them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, that's great. I think you glossed over something, or like you said it, and it's probably one of those common things that you say, but I think I want to reiterate it or highlight the fact that at 37, you changed careers in a pretty drastic way. And I think, so I'm 34, so I have conversations with sort of my friends and just colleagues around my age all the time. And a lot of people think, you know, beyond 30, they're like, that's kind of it. They're like, I'm locked in now. Like, this is my decade. They're like, I figured it out in my 20s. I've got my 30s to make money, and, you know, and they think it's sort of over at 30. So like, can you sort of dig into your mindset a little bit at 37, where you were maybe not so confident to be able to switch careers, but whatever gave you the drive to just be like, I'm going to do it?
Well, I'll tell you this much. I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than my younger counterparts. So that is absolutely the case. It was just I knew it was my purpose. And even when I was working at Wendy's, even when I was working in hospital administration, it was always there. I never let that dream die. I never said, okay, I'm just going to settle. And I've seen so many people in my life, and I'm sure you have too, Parker, that, you know, they get to a point and they sort of just sit down and quit and give up. It's like, okay, I'm where I am. Not really my purpose, but I just don't want to put in the energy. I just don't want to put in the effort to finding that purpose and living it. And I remember Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor during World War II, wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He had a line. He said, you know, you have a moral responsibility to find your purpose in life and to live it. So I guess I never let the dream die. It was always there. It was always in the back of my mind. I liked watching cop shows. I liked reading books about law enforcement and investigative techniques and things like that. So it was really, you know, it was just a matter of time, I thought, before I was going to get there. Yeah, I was 37 years old, but, you know, I was still in pretty good shape. I was still, you know, an athlete and still doing exercise and eating right and things like that. So it wasn't as much of a stretch as it probably would have been for somebody, you know, I'm approaching 40, I'm kind of out of shape and don't have great habits in my life. So I had those good habits. So it was difficult, but it wasn't as difficult as it probably could have been. And I had the support. You know, I had the support of my wife when I initially started. We were living in California, and there was a circular that came in the mail, and I never read these things. I always, you know, put them in the recycling. But I was just leafing through it at lunch one day, and it was like, take this course at Santa Barbara City College, and you can apply to be a police officer at any agency in the state. And you know, my wife had married me when I was a suit and tie, you know, 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. And you know, you can imagine that conversation at dinner. It's like, hey, hon, see this thing here? I'd really like to do this. And she was like, then go ahead and do it. Take the class and apply and see if you get in. And I got on with Santa Barbara, and I would work all week in my regular job. And then I'd come home Friday night, put on my uniform, go to roll call, and work all night as a police officer. And my wife would say, you would come home Saturday morning exhausted, but with this huge grin on your face. She was like, I knew that's what you were supposed to do. So when our daughter was born and we moved to Cincinnati, I looked at her and I said, the bug has been bitten. I've been bitten by this bug. I want to do this full time. And she absolutely supported me in doing that.
That's great. Exhausted, but invigorated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that sort of enthusiasm, and you alluded to it earlier, little pings of fear can be very good signs of something that you should maybe do to try to overcome something that is maybe in your path of life.
Absolutely.
How old were you when you were diagnosed with cancer?
51.
51. Okay. Can you kind of walk me through what the moments were like after you found out? Because I talked about this with you on our pre-call. Like you can employ empathy and try to put yourself in that situation to prepare for it. And I think a lot of people do that for death and try to understand like what this big, huge event is going to be. But I feel like being there actually in the moment, no amount of preparation, no amount of empathy can really prepare you for that.
You're right. I mean, was I prepared? I mean, I'd had, my father, my grandmother died of cancer. I had friends die of cancer and things like that. And it was like, oh, sure, I'm prepared. I was not prepared at all. Here I am. I was a girls' high school basketball coach, and I had a school security consulting business that I was also doing. And I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially didn't think much of it because I thought, well, I'm a coach. I'm on my feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I went to see, I'm in an appointment, went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me, just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. Fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. Until finally, he just laid it out for me. And I think when he said this really kind of hit me right between the eyes. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hands. And I know I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief initially. First it was denial. I mean, it was like, wait a minute, my dad had cancer. I had a physical every year. I was eating right. I was exercising. I can't possibly have cancer.
Yeah, right. You're like, it's just a callus, right?
Yeah, it's a callus. How can I possibly have cancer? And then you get mad. It's like, how can I possibly have cancer? I've done all these things right in my life. And then our daughter was in high school at the time. It was a bargaining with God. It's like, look, just let me live long enough to see our daughter graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got down, got depressed. And then I just got to a point where, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck, for lack of a better term. I do not like these cards that I have been dealt, but I am going to have to play them to the very best of my ability. And I made a decision very early on that I was never going to take out my misfortune on a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, a technician, anybody that was trying to help me. And I'll give you a quick story. I was last time I was in treatment a couple of weeks ago for the tumors I have in my lungs. I have to give blood first, and it was early. I was there with the receptionist, and she said to me, she said, you always come in here and you're positive and you're nice and you ask me about my weekend and things like that. I said, well, yeah, why wouldn't I do that? And she said, you'd be surprised the number of people that come in here and are mean and are almost cruel. I asked her, I said, do you understand why those people do that? And she was very young. And she's like, well, no. I said, because they're scared, because they're anxious, because they're worried, because they know that whatever this blood test says, they may die or things like that. I said, it's not you. I said, you have a tremendous opportunity to turn that around on that. May just be, no matter how cruel they are to you, you can be kind and you can be helpful to them. because you've got to understand, it's not you. They're just projecting it onto you. They don't think you're a bad person. And so she didn't get that. I mean, I think I opened her eyes a little bit to say, yeah, I guess maybe I never thought about it from their point of view. When you're young, it's all about you. And so thinking about things from other people's point of view tends to change your perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. And before I get to that question, I appreciate you sharing this. I can imagine it's tough to kind of relive those moments. So I do appreciate you sharing that with us. Sure. Facing outward, like taking your focus away from yourself and facing it outward, is that one of your better tools and sort of strategies? Or because that way you can sort of focus your energy on the people around you, the people that are trying to help you. Was that one of those major things that helped you get through it? And was it a shift that you had to make?
Was it a shift I had to make? That's a good question. I guess let me back up for a minute. I mean, I don't want anybody who's listening to us think that, I mean, you're looking at me now, there's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I still have bad days. I still get down. I still cry. I still feel sorry for myself. But I think you hit the nail on the head with exactly what you said. When you're doing that, you're looking inward. It's all about you and how lousy I feel and things like that. And I find a way to, at least for me, to get out of that is to go find somebody to help, go find somebody to have a conversation with. And I'm at the hospital every 3 weeks for an entire week. So there's plenty of people that I can interact with. And, hey, how's it going today? Do you want to have a cup of coffee? You want to sit around and talk and things like that? Because you can kind of tell the people that are, they're so in their head. They're so worried about what's going to happen. And now let's talk about each other. Tell me about you, what's going on and things like that. So for me, all of a sudden now I'm not focused on me. I'm focused on somebody else. And now it's just like somebody threw a switch, and now I don't feel as bad. I feel good. I'm interacting with another person, and you can tell that, especially if they're in that, I'm living in my head right now, and that's not a good place to be, that now they're not living in their head as much anymore and stuff like that. So I don't know if it was so much of a, of a switch for me, but it certainly was. I've always, cared about people and wanted to be service oriented, but it was just a matter of when I get in those ugly places, I can't stay there. I got to go find somebody to help, because, that's when the demons of doubt sort of creep in, and, it's not a good place to be alone with yourself when that happens.
Yeah, I think probably having those conversations with the people that you see who are in their head, it must be such a relief for them to just have somebody to talk to about that and just get out of, like you said, get out of that just inward, me-focused mentality. It must be such a relief for them. So I'm sure that's a very nice service that you don't necessarily advertise that you're providing, but it's just this very mutually beneficial thing that you two can go through. I think as you were speaking towards the end there, I started thinking maybe shift was not the right term, but maybe because you mentioned that you still get down, maybe your ability to make that transition is faster now. Like you recognize you're getting down, and you know the tools to utilize to like get yourself out of that state. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that is, and I think a lot of that has to do with, I guess, for lack of a better, sort of callousing your mind, sort of doing hard things, doing difficult things. I always recommend to people, I try to do this every day of my life. Do one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. Doesn't have to be a big thing, but if you do those little things every day, if you get in that habit, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we get let go from our job, find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you'll be so much more resilient to handle that pain when it presents itself.
Yeah, you're just building the reps, building the practice, where it's just it's ingrained in you at that point. It's not like, oh, I need to go search for these tools. It's already within you. That's really smart. Can you talk about your support system? Because obviously, like, I can't imagine somebody getting through this without a very robust support system. So can you kind of talk about what you had in place? And then I think you probably have some pretty profound thoughts on like how people should think of support systems in their life as well.
I do. I am. You're absolutely right. I would be dead many times over. If it hadn't been for my wife, my daughter, the doctors, nurses that take care of me and stuff like that. I kind of I talk about my 3 Fs, and that's faith, family, and friends. And I have a very strong faith in God. And it's funny when I got cancer, and when I got cancer, it really kind of resonated. But I've seen people do this. They start down the road toward a goal, and they butt up against the impediment. Something gets in their way, and they can't get over it, around it, through it, and so they quit. They give up. But we just don't give up. Now we got to blame somebody. We got to find somebody to blame. And you blame your parents, you blame your boss, you blame your station in life. Very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. So I get cancer, and immediately people are like, well, who do you blame? I don't blame anybody because I got cancer. I've had all 88 genes the doctors either know of or suspect cause every form of cancer that we know tested. And I have no mutations in any of my genes, which certainly begs the question, how or why did I get this disease? Nobody's been able to answer that question. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. But then when people find out I had a faith life, it was, well, you must blame God because you have cancer. And I used to joke with them. I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, hey, Terry Tucker cancer today. I do not think that in the least. But I'm absolutely 100% certain that he has given me the strength, the resolve to continue to move forward during some incredibly ugly times. So that's the faith part of it. The family part of it, it's my wife and daughter. And I'll give you really kind of a story that kind of illustrates this. I had just had my leg amputated, and I had still have tumors in my lungs. And my doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this fight. And I looked at him and I said, is it going to save my life? It's like, yeah, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I was like, well, one, I'm not afraid to die. And two, I'm not sure I want to go through all that ugliness if the outcome is going to be the exact same, whether I take the chemotherapy or not. But let me go home and talk to my family. So I go home and get in the kitchen and I start saying what's going on. And my daughter's immediately like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that.
Do we have a quorum?
Yeah, exactly. And so we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about, my wife, daughter, and I, how we feel about me having chemotherapy. And then when we're done with that, my daughter's like, all right, let's think about how many people want dad to have chemotherapy. And my wife and daughter raise their hand like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted?
Sorry, Terry. You lost this one.
For something I don't want to do. But I remembered back when I was in the police academy, and our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. And so I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my family more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was a bridge drug that got me to the clinical trial drug that I'm on now. So it was the right thing to do. And then finally, friends, there were people when I got cancer who I thought absolutely, positively, 100%, they will be in that foxhole with me. I can rely on them. I can depend on them. And not a lot, but a number of those people weren't there. We're like, ooh, no, you're 51 years old. I'm not that far away from you age-wise. Can't deal with this. Can't watch you go through this. Then there were other people who I never thought would step up. I never thought would be there for me, who have been there for me for the last 11 years. So, having a support system, you do nothing in life by yourself. I don't care, you're a tennis player, you're a golf player. No, there's a team involved in all of you. And I'll end with this. One of the things that I learned, probably the most important thing I learned from being an athlete, from playing team sports, and for me, it was sports. It could be whatever team you're on, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very collective thing. Going back to your friends, do you think for the friends who unfortunately weren't there for you, do you think it was just too close to them? Like it was just, the fear was too much for them to get any closer?
Oh, absolutely. They were, you're living your life. You're you're a dad, you're a coach, you're working, you're doing whatever you're doing, then bang, you get hit right between the eyes with this. You're probably going to die in 2 years. They're like, oh, no. They absolutely could not deal with the fact that I had cancer. And so, I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. That's something they're going to have to figure out on their own. And some of them have kind of come back a little more into my life, sort of, in and out kind of thing. But, well, I can't rely on those people. I don't know if you're going to be there for me or not. There are people that I know I can rely on, and those are usually my go-to people when, having a bad day.
So what is it about those people that you maybe didn't expect them to be the ones who were there for you, but they were? Was it just a sense of courage that they had that they could step up? Because I'm just trying to tease out, like, if other people are in this situation where they have a friend in that situation, like, can you identify any traits about them where you can sort of help people make that leap to be the friend for the person who needs it?
Yeah, and I guess I can sort of answer that in a story. I was diagnosed when I lived in Texas, and I had a very good friend of mine who was like 95 years old at the time. He'd been in World War II, and I had my first surgery. They took out the tumor on the bottom of my foot and the lymph nodes that were draining that area to be tested. And so I didn't have to spend the night in the hospital. I was able to go later, and I'd been home about 15 minutes, and my cell phone rings. And this guy's name was Bud. And he said, Terry, can I come over? He said, I know you just got over from Moscow. Can I come over for a few minutes? And I said, sure, Bud. So, 15, 20 minutes later, here's Bud standing in our living room with a fully cooked chicken and a pan of cream cheese Danish that he had bought at Costco. Now, Bud was, he didn't ask, and I know I've done this in my life. I even write about it in my book. What do we always say? When somebody's going in for surgery, even if somebody's going in for something, great, like they're having a baby or something like that. What do we always say? Hey, if you need anything, give me a call. And I think that is the biggest cop out in the world. That's basically, that's basically sitting on the sidelines and pretending you're playing in the game. If you want to help somebody, if you have the courage to do that, and I think that's what these people have done. They don't ask, they just get involved. The same things I need to have done at my house: cut the grass, take the garbage out, go to the grocery store, walk the dog. You're doing the same thing at your house. So why don't you stop by my house and do that? Don't ask me, because I don't have time to figure out how you can help me. Understand that I've got to do the same things you've got to do, and just do something. Here, I went to the store. Here's some groceries for you. Hey, I'm going to walk your dog this afternoon or this morning or whatever you do. Just get involved. Don't take yourself off the hook by saying, hey, you need anything, give me a call. I don't have time to give you a call.
It also puts the onus on you, and you're already dealing with enough. No, that I think that's a great piece of advice. I really appreciate you sharing that. Just to do it, and not that is kind of a cop out. The give me a call if you need anything.
Right.
God, I'm sure I've said that before.
It's all about it.
Very self-reflective moment. No, it's great. It's these are the teachable moments, though, right? So I want to ask you one more question, sort of on this track, and then I want to move to sort of what you're doing now with your company. But a lot of the conversations I have on this show is kind of highlighting issues in the healthcare industry, and hopefully speaking with interesting people who are trying to innovate around that and just make people better advocates for themselves as patients. Can you describe, like, how is your experience through all of this, navigating the healthcare industry? Because it's not an easy system to navigate. It's very tricky here in the US. So just how is your experience running through all of that?
Yeah, it's been difficult, and then it's been amazing. Like I said, when I was first diagnosed, I was told that I would probably be dead in 2 years. If I got a miracle, maybe I'd make it to 5. But they had nothing to offer me other than surgery. If it's someplace where we can cut it out, we'll go cut it out. But other than that, we have nothing for you. Now, 11 years later, you mentioned I'm on a clinical trial drug. And that drug does nothing to the cancer. It's not like chemo where it goes in and kills the cancer. It's a drug that basically strips the enzyme, the protein, off of the cancer so that my own immune system can say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't belong here. It's like a cold, or a flu virus, and attack it. So it's my body helping me, as opposed to giving me chemotherapy, which, kills all fast growing cells. That's why you lose your hair. That's why you have diarrhea and throw up and all that kind of stuff. So, and that's 11-year window, between when I was diagnosed and what I have now. So that has been amazing in terms of the fact that I am still here because of that. But it's really and the doctors and nurses have been great. It's the billing part of it that drives us. My wife and I got a bill literally for a blood draw from 3 years ago. It's like, here, you owe us this money. And we do a high deductible. So usually by middle of the year, we have met our deductible and everything else should be covered. So we went back to him and said, no, this happened in November. We had met our deductible. All they came back with is said, no, you haven't. What do you mean, no, I haven't? It's like, well, we're not going to go research it. We're not going to figure it out. We're not going to spend 3 hours on the phone with your insurance company until they finally get somebody that can say, oh yeah, you didn't meet your deductible and stuff like that. And it was such a small amount that we were like, oh, the heck with it, we'll just pay it. And that's, I hate that. That's not right. I mean, the amount of money that we have given in health insurance, that the insurance company's given and that we pay just out of our own pocket has been ridiculous. So I love the doctors. I love the nurses. I love the care I get, but I'll end with this. And I'm not going to tell you where I'm treated, but I've had doctors, I've had physician's assistants, I've had nurses say to me that we're sort of boxed in with every patient. You got 20 minutes, get that patient in, get them out and move on to the next patient. Well, what if I need 30 patients? Nope. Here's the problem. They're operating on a business model. They're not operating on a patient-centered model where we care about the patient. Do you really? Or am I just a dollar sign to you? And that's really what I feel is the most frustrating part about this. And they're always, go paperless. It's like, no, I want EOBs for every single thing that happens to me because I want to be able to cross-reference all this stuff and, doing it on a computer, trying to find the right page. No, it's just easier to do it. And thank God I've got a smart wife. Like I said, haven't been for I'd be dead a long time.
You brought up a lot of really good points in there. One of which is that it's so unfortunate that a lot of people just succumb to the idea of like defeat when it comes to, fighting hospital bills or anything like that. And, luckily it was a small enough amount where you're like, I think for my own peace of mind, it might just be easier to pay it. But like, that's not an acceptable thing, especially when it's like the most lucrative or it's the biggest expense in this country. So a lot of times that bill is not a small enough bill where you can just let it go. And then you need to fight with these multi-billion-dollar organizations. Not a fun thing. And then the other thing you brought up, I think, which is always worth highlighting, is that the people who are treating you, unless it's like a primary care practice where that doctor also owns the practice, but those independents are so rare at this point. For the most part, like those people are not thrilled with the situation they're in. And like you said, they're very boxed in. And it's just the infrastructure of the industry that they're operating in, that they are sort of stuck with this very limited patient care because of how much paperwork and administrative touch points there are beyond the care when that should be the focus. So.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing that I have found to be very difficult, I was with, my oncologist was an award-winning melanoma specialist, won all kinds of awards. I've been with him for 10 years and he left. He didn't retire. He left. My orthopedic surgeon that amputated my leg, he left. He didn't retire. He left. The pain doctor that I was seeing, he left. Didn't retire. And that's what's frustrating. It's like you've got quality people delivering immense, and including an award-winning doctor who's bringing, awards to your hospital that you can tout and use in advertising and things like that. And they're leaving. They're not just retiring. I get retirement. They're like, no, I'm going somewhere else. I can't deal with this anymore. And that's frustrating because I'm in a really good place that I get taken care of.
Yeah. No, from all the conversations I have, it doesn't really matter. Let's be clear, the quality of the hospital certainly does matter, but it's not like this is only happening in like rural underfunded hospitals. Like this happens everywhere.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I was treated at MD Anderson Cancer Center when I was in Texas. So, I mean, probably the premier cancer hospital in the world. And same issues with them. I have a good friend who was a former doctor with them as well.
Yeah, the issues amongst healthcare in this country are ubiquitous across the country, unfortunately. Plenty to do on that front. But can you kind of share what you're doing with your company and just how you're helping other people in the world now?
Yeah. I mean, initially I started a motivational speaking business, and then COVID hit. And like so many other organizations, companies, I had to figure a way to deliver the service. I mean, nobody was doing anything virtually or in person during COVID. And somebody had reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I said, sure. What's a podcast? I mean, literally, well, we kind of talk about it and then we put it on social media. I'm like, okay, I'm old, social media. What are we talking here? And stuff like that. And so I said, yes, I'll do it. And I remember I was so scared. I was so nervous. I literally had Post-it notes all around the camera. And he would ask me a question and I would kind of lean in and read one of the Post-it notes. I was horrible. I was terrible. And, I'm probably getting close to 700 podcasts all around the world when I started this, and met some amazing people. Have had some great experiences with that. And so it's how do you get your message out? How do you say, this is my story. I don't have all the answers, but maybe there's something in here that can help you. And that's really been what it's been about. I started a membership company. Our membership component of it didn't go well. It didn't work out. I didn't have the time to do it. I'm treated every 3 weeks for an entire week at the hospital. As my dad used to say, I'm off the air. I don't have the ability to do anything there. So, then I wrote the book, and I'll tell you right now, don't write a book to make money or to get famous, because it's not going to happen for most people. Again, it was, can I make a difference through this book? And so now that things are opening up, I'm back giving talks to people virtually and in person and things like that. And my goal, my purpose right now, as I mentioned earlier, is really just to tell my story and put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can with whatever time that I have left. So that's kind of my company now. It's really just, as I always say, shooting my mouth off about something that near and dear to my heart.
No, it sounds, you have such a remarkable story, and it sounds like you're doing good work. And, I can't imagine people listening to you for any amount of time and not being moved in a positive direction. Can you share a little bit more about your book? I'm sure it's a labor of love. I've talked to many people who wrote books and they have similar sentiments. So you've put a lot of work into it. Can you share some about that? And we're definitely going to link to it in the show notes as well.
Sure. So the book is called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it was really a book that was born out of two conversations. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to Colorado with her fiance, close to where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. She got real quiet for a while, and she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college who reached out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And Parker, I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him those. I wanted to see if I could go deep. So I spent some time, took some notes, and kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the 3 to 4 month period that I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Do you have a favorite principle?
I do. And I'm not proud that I have this principle. And you make a great point. As an author, when people reach out, they want to talk about the book. there's always one principle. Each chapter is a principle, and they're not in any particular order. Number one isn't more important than number seven, but there's always one principle that resonates with the reader. And the one that, even though I wrote all 10 of them, the one that resonates with me because I've done this probably more than I care to admit in my life. And the chapter's titled this: Most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. I know I've wanted to do something or start something. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't have all the information, or maybe I'm not smart enough, or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And, I've always said the road to success is paved with failure. Nobody who's ever been successful in life is going to tell you that they never failed, that, they never had a setback. So, it was, I've done that in my life, and that's probably why it's my favorite.
No, I love that. It's very much about being like in the present moment. I think a lot of your fears can be born out of past experiences and maybe unnecessary projections to the future. So yeah, I'm very much into mindfulness and meditation. So it's just one of those overlaps, and I'm really appreciative of you sharing that. That's a great thing to keep in mind as well. Yeah, that's a great one. Another thing that you mentioned, which I noticed a few years ago, for anyone who's young who's listening to this, if you're in college, you can just get away with so much as a college student. If you just reach out to people, say, I'm in college, people will just give you stuff for free as if you're not going to be their competition in a few years. It's remarkable what you can get away with as a college student. So just email everyone and ask them for like their best advice. For the most part, you're going to get it.
You really are. And it's amazing how many people are willing to talk to. I remember when I was working at Wendy's, Ted Turner, who started TBS and owned the Atlanta Braves, and that he came for one day to the corporate office. And of course, the speculation was he was going to buy Wendy's, and he was just there to take a look around. He never bought Wendy's, but he was standing in the lobby. And I had gone to school. His son and I graduated together. I didn't really know his son, but I graduated with him. And he's standing there, and I'm like, should I go talk to him? Should I say hello? And I'm like, what the heck? Why not? I went up and talked to him. His driver had gone to get the car, and he talked to me for like 45 minutes, just standing there. What do you like about Wendy's? Tell me, what'd you think about the Citadel? And I'm like, this guy is like a billionaire. Yeah, I'm like a trainee. I am like, way down on the food chain here, but just a very gracious person with his time. And I always remembered that. And I'll tell you one more quick story. I was recruited by Mike Krzyzewski, Coach K, who coached at Duke for a number of years, when he was at West Point. I actually came to Chicago, sat with my parents and I, and said, hey, come play for me at West Point. And I was the idiot that said, no, I don't think I want to do that. And he would have gone to Duke my junior year at West Point. But fast forward, our daughter's 3 years old. I'm a policeman. I'm working nights. Duke's playing Connecticut for the national championship. And I recorded it at the time. I was going to watch it later. And our daughter, like I said, was 3. After dinner one night, when I had an off night, she and I went down. We watched the game. Duke loses. At the very end, during the one shining moment montage, Krzyzewski and one of his players, William Avery, has this big hug. For the next 2 weeks, every night after dinner, our daughter's like, Dad, can we go watch the hug? Dad, can we go watch the hug? I'm like, the hug? What are you talking about? And it was that hug between Krzyzewski and William Avery that resonated with her, as a 3-year-old child. And so I sat down, I wrote Krzyzewski a letter. I said, you don't remember me, you recruited me, et cetera, but I want to tell you the story, about my daughter and your relationship with William Avery. Sent it off to him. 2 weeks later, I end up getting a handwritten letter from him, basically saying, I get real close to my players. Thank you for telling me that story, et cetera. That to me was one of the classiest things. I think that, he didn't have to write that letter to me, but he did. And I still have that letter in a safe deposit box.
No, it's amazing. And it just goes to show that if you think you should reach out to somebody, you probably should. Yeah, you're in exactly the same position if they don't respond. And a lot of times they do. Right. A lot of times it's people you have no business reaching out to, but that's how fortuitous things happen. Exactly. I do want to be respectful of your time, so I have a few more questions, but I'm going to get you out of here on time. You have this big emphasis on like community and support, but also on individual responsibility. And I'm not sure how much time you spend on social media, but it's easy for these camps or these tribes to sort of pop up. And it's very easy for people to land on, I'm just in the individual responsibility side of things. I don't need anyone else. I'm going to do it myself. So like, how do you strike the balance, or how do you talk to people about the balance between the two of them? Because obviously too much of one, not enough of the other isn't going to be great. They can't really stand without each other in a really meaningful way. So I'm curious how you balance those two things.
Yeah, I think that's an important question. None of us, as I said earlier, none of us become successful in a vacuum without other people helping us. And I think it's incredibly important to understand that, you need people and you need people, but don't use people. Don't say, okay, I'm gonna take what I can from you, and then I'm gonna, get a jump on, I'm gonna move up, and then I'm gonna forget about you. Excuse me. I can't stand it when people use other people for their own gain. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to, to you, to your character, to your humility. I remember I was interviewing for a marketing job, and I was meeting with the senior vice president, and we met for 90 minutes for this job interview and marketing position. We spent the entire hour and a half talking about my life from the time basically I was born until I graduated from college. Not one business question, not one marketing question. And I said to him afterwards, I said, I have to ask. I said, your style of interviewing was rather interesting. I thought it was kind of goofy, but I didn't use that word. And I said, I got to ask you, why do you do that? Why do you say that? Why did you ask me those questions? He said, well, here's the deal. I got plenty of people around me that'll tell me whether you're good at marketing or you're a good fit for our team. He said, I got plenty of people that tell me that. I want to hire people of good character. And he said, I believe your character is developed in the first 20 years of your life. And so that's why I asked you, what was it like growing up with your brothers and playing basketball and having knee surgery? And what was high school like? And what did you have a girlfriend? And, what was college like? I wanted to know that because that was going to tell me a lot about your character. And something else he said, character is caught. It's not taught. You're not going to read a book or take a class and say, oh, I got great character now. You're going to observe other people and say, boy, I really like the way that lady handled that situation. Or, boy, that guy really belittled that person. And I don't want to do it. So, you learn these things early. And his point was, you can change your character as you move through life and as you're an adult, but the bulk of your character is going to be developed before or as you get out of college, 20, 21 years old and stuff like that. And I never thought about that. I never thought about, how do we develop character? How do you get things like that? So I think character is you've got to be comfortable with you. You've got to be comfortable in your own skin and being able to say to yourself, yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put that person down. I'm not going to get involved with that person. And I've come to this point in my life, I think, there's that old saying about walk the walk and talk the talk. I really don't care what you say until I see how you put that into action. If you're telling me what a great guy you are, or a great person you are, and how you've done all this stuff, but you go out and treat, the janitor or, the person behind the counter like a pain in the butt, I don't really want to have anything to do with you. And it's just, I'm just old enough, to this point where I want to be around people that make me better. I want to be around people that make me smarter, that love me, that care about me, and that most importantly, are willing to risk the relationship because they love me enough to tell me the truth. And I don't think there are enough of those people in the world. If you've got one of those people in your life or multiple people, hang on to them. Hang on to them. And I know you're going to be mad when they say, gee, Terry, you're really screwing up here. You shouldn't be doing this. What do we say? No, get away from me. You're not my friend. No, those are the people that are your friends. So find those people, put them in your life, but then understand that you ultimately, at the end of the day, are responsible for your own decisions.
That's great. I think a lot of the messages, at least that I'm kind of pulling out of this, are that courage seems to be a very common theme. The courage to be a truthful friend and to have your actions match your words. One of the things I say quite a bit, words are pretty easy, right? Yeah. I can say that I'm a unicorn, right?
but can I prove to you that I am a mythical creature with a horn coming out of my head? My actions are going to be hard to match that. Yeah. Actions are where it's at. So one last thing, just to wrap things up here. I just want to get your closing thoughts. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up? I think you've dropped a ton of gems, and I'll thank you again before we leave, but this has been a really great conversation for me. So thank you. But any closing thoughts before we go?
Yeah. Let me tell you another story. I had a nurse recently ask me what it was like to have my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2020. And I told her it absolutely has not been easy. When you're 6'8", learning to walk again, falling from this height, not a good thing. You get hurt, when that happens. So, you got to be careful. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Parker. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And we spend a ton of time. I mean, this as a personal trainer. We spend a ton of time working on this. I'm going to work out. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to get plenty of rest. I'm going to reduce stress. I'm going to do all that stuff. And I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm absolutely telling you should do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on who you really are. This body is just a vessel, a house to house who we are. Spend time working on your heart, your mind, and your soul. Eventually, you're going to die and this body's going to decay. Your heart, your mind, and your soul, those things are eternal. And I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them.
What can I possibly add to that? That seems like the best way to end things and wrap things up. So Terry, again, thank you so much for being here. This is, without even knowing it, this is exactly the conversation I needed to have. So for me personally, this has been very helpful. Everyone listening, I hope you got as much out of it as I did. And again, Terry, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on, Parker. I enjoyed talking with you.
Hey everyone, that's all for today's show. I want to thank you so much for stopping by and watching, especially if you've made it all the way to this point. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes are going to be released, feel free to subscribe and make sure you hit the bell button as well. To learn more about today's guest, feel free to look in the description. You can also visit the podcast website, which is exploringhealthpodcast.com. That website will also be linked in the description. As always, likes, shares, comments are a huge help to me and to this channel and to the show. So any of that you can do, I would really appreciate. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.